So greetings from Pennsylvania once again, and I'm currently sitting in the middle of what's known as a fairy ring. There's like a ring of mushrooms growing around me at the moment. I'll tell you what they are in a moment, but what is a fairy ring? They often grow in your yard. They're quite obvious if one is there. So I think I talked a little bit about these, I think earlier this spring when I was hiking a section of the Horseshoe Trail, but since this one came up again, it comes up every year in my backyard here, so I thought I'd talk a little more detail about what these rings are. Yeah, so you can see it growing right here. Doesn't make, there's some up there, it doesn't quite make a perfect ring, but that's the way it is sometimes. There's not always a perfect ring. And every year it's a little bit different. But you can kind of step back and you can kind of see the ring right there. There's nothing growing over there at the moment. There's one little lone colony growing up there. And another interesting thing is that every year this ring tends to get a little bit bigger than the year before, and there's a reason for that. And a little bit of what I'm going to talk about today, I talked about briefly in my most recent mail time video. Someone asked me how mushrooms just seem to pop up out of nowhere overnight, similar to these right here. These were not here just all that long ago. But you have to understand that when you're looking at, when you see these mushrooms like this pop up, what you're seeing is just what we call the fruiting body. This is the part of the mushroom or the fungus that appears when the main mushroom body is mature and ready to reproduce. And where is that main fungus body? Well, it's in the ground in this case. So underground here is where the main part of the mushroom is actually growing, or the fungus. And we call that the mycelium. Yeah, so in this case it's growing in the ground. Sometimes they're growing like on rotten logs and stuff. You know, like if you tear open a rotten log, sometimes you see all that white silky stuff growing throughout it. That is the actual fungus, the mycelium. And like I said, when that's ready to reproduce, it sends up these fruiting bodies. So we often think of mushrooms as being the only part of the fungus, and that's not true. There's a whole lot more of it underground that you can't see. So why does it grow in a ring? So mushrooms don't produce seeds. They're not in the plant kingdom. They belong to their own kingdom. So they produce something called spores. But for ease of understanding, you can still think of spores as being somewhat similar to seeds, even though they're not. So at some point many years ago, some spores landed right here in the middle of what is now this fairy ring, and they grew right here in the middle somewhere, maybe like right here. But in order for mushrooms to grow, they need to eat, they need a source of energy. And if they're not plants, they don't get their energy from the sunlight. Where do they get their energy from? Well, mushrooms, many fungus, they feed off of decaying organic matter, off of dead things. So that's where they get their energy from, decaying matter. And in most lawns, you have a whole layer of grass clippings that's rotting away. And that's what the fungus, in this case, is feeding off of. So when they first start growing, that's what they're eating off. So why the ring? Why does it get bigger every year? So what happens is, in their first year of growth, where they go right in the middle, over the course of the year, the mycelium, it feeds on that organic matter that's right there. But at the end of the year, that organic matter is all gone. In order to get more, the fungus has to spread out further into a larger ring, and then it feeds off that. And every year it needs to get bigger and bigger to get more organic matter, because everything in their current ring, they already ate, I guess you could say. So every year that ring gets bigger, because it needs more of that organic matter to eat. Because like I said, where it was growing previously, it disposed of all that organic matter. It needs more, so it grows out every year. It gets bigger every year. And it's not always a perfect circle. As it gets bigger and bigger, it gets more, oblong, and other things happen. The shape gets a little bit more distorted. Like I said, this ring isn't even complete, but other years it is more complete. But every ring is going to be different, depending on what happens. And a lot of times where the ring is, it's not really showing up so well with this ring. But the grass sometimes can be greener where the mushrooms are growing, the fungus is growing, because as they're breaking apart that organic matter, that's what the mycelium does, it releases nutrients into the soil too, helping the grass. I have one picture that kind of shows that a little bit. I think maybe I'll share that with you. You can kind of see how it's greener, if you have a good eye maybe, or an imagination. But in this circle you can't really tell. And not all mushrooms produce a fairy ring. This species here is called the green spored lepiota. They're actually poisonous, but they are known for making these fairy rings. Not all, just because you find a mushroom in your yard, like sometimes you'll find those puffballs in your yard, those don't make fairy rings. So not all species do that, only a few. And as the years go by, this ring will get bigger and bigger. But sometimes, like I said, they don't retain their circle shape so much. Like there's kind of a half ring, but then way over here, there's some mushroom books there. You have this little colony growing over here. So is that could be a separate ring, or perhaps it's part of this colony, a part that just spread out a little bit more, perhaps. I'm kind of thinking they might be their own little individual ring over there. You know, that could be like a new colony that grew from the spores of this colony too. Because I know in the past there have been mushrooms growing over here as well, so I think this is just one colony. This might be another starter colony. There's a slight curve to it. So why are they called fairy rings? Well, according to lore and legend, if you come out here at night and sit in the middle of a fairy ring, you get, you know, visitation from, you know, magical creatures. Because if you think about it, it is kind of odd to see a whole group of like large mushrooms like this growing in a perfect circle, like out in the woods or some meadow. It kind of gives off a certain aura, so people associate it with fairy magical type things. And I think the idea or the belief then too was that if you spent the night out here and were visited, maybe like on a full moon, that fairy or elf or magical creature would bequest some kind of a gift to you, or a wish in some cases, you know, to bless you in some way, I guess. I've never tried it. I don't plan on doing it either. I'm not gonna spend a whole night sitting out here waiting for something to come visit me. That's where the name fairy ring comes from. Like I said, it has associated with magic or fairies or elven type creatures, things like that. Like I said, I can understand why. It does have a magical look to it, especially if you rock out in some deep woods, some big huge old pine trees with a ring of bright white mushrooms growing. You'd think there might be something magical about it. And I should say too, there's nothing dangerous about these fairy rings. I mean, in this case, these mushrooms are poisonous, but the fairy ring itself, the fungus, it's not eating off your grass. It's not destroying your lawn. It's feeding off the organic matter in your lawn. And actually, it benefits your lawn to some extent. Like by breaking down the organic matter, it's releasing nutrients into the soil. So it's not actually harming your lawn in any way at all. So they're perfectly safe to leave out here, as long as you don't eat them, depending on what they are. But these probably won't be out here for much longer. The landlord always mows them under. That's life. But that'll be it then, folks. But I thought I'd quick take advantage of this opportunity. Other years I was going to film a video on fairy rings, but I waited like one day too long and they got mowed under. Or I think the neighbor kids like to come over here and knock them down. It's kind of fun as a kid to push these over, but I had time to do a video this time. So they're kind of cool, like I said. If you have one in your yard, you want to let us know about it, or share a picture or whatever, go ahead and do so. Those are fairy rings. Or you can try spending the night out here in one, right in the middle, and you can let us know if you're visited by something special. Alright. Anyway, folks, I think that'll be it for this video. As always, thanks for coming along, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.